Absolutely. So my name is Caroline Barth. I am a patrol officer with the Colorado Springs Police Department. I have worked for the police department for about 6 years, 3.5 of which I've been a patrol officer.
Awesome. And how did you first become interested?
So I became interested in this career, actually my bachelor's degree, my education is in physical education, so I thought maybe at one point after I graduated I wanted to be a PE teacher or maybe a strength and conditioning coach. So I got a phenomenal opportunity to come out to Colorado Springs. I was doing an internship with the NSCA, and doing that I realized, hey, I have a lot of clients that are law enforcement and military. I really need to see what they do so that I can actually train them better and do my job better. Well, through that process I ended up doing a lot of ride-alongs and a lot of role-playing and training with them, and realized that their job was just more fun than mine. And at the time I was 20 years old, so I knew I came from a small town and I didn't have much life experience. I knew I wanted to get a little bit more experience before I started down that career path as a police officer. So I originally applied as a 911 call taker with the police department, was fortunate enough to get that job. So I did that for about 2.5 years until I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on the city and kind of the job and everything, and was again lucky and fortunate enough to apply as a police officer and got hired on. Not specifically. So there is a minimum education requirement that the Colorado Springs Police Department requires all of the applicants to have in order to be considered to be hired. But aside from that, our department does a really good job at training you with the information that you need and the training that you need to be successful in the career. So I personally think it's actually better to have a background in something that's not police work, because it really does kind of open your mind and give you different set of critical thinking skills and problem solving skills in order to be able to just be successful in the career. But aside from that, then the department sends you through their own 6-month academy that they run through the department, and that's the training that you need. It's definitely not like a one-size-fits-all personality trait to be a police officer. I really do think that it takes all kinds of people to be successful and really meet the needs of the community, because our community is super diverse, so we need a lot of people that are having different traits and stuff. I think if you had to pick a few that would be more beneficial in the career, I think a combination of patience and decisiveness are two huge traits that can really help people, being able to step back, slow things down, kind of look at the totality of the circumstances and all the situations that we deal with, and then be able to make a decision from there, not rushing through things. But at the same time, sometimes we're faced with emergent situations that truly are dangerous and need action taken immediately, and so having kind of the decisiveness piece of that too. So I think patience and decisiveness are two big ones. I think resilience is a big one too. If anybody has any plans of staying in the career long term, a lot of emotional intelligence goes into being a police officer and constantly kind of taking on the burden of other people's problems and everything on a daily basis. So probably those are 3 really important traits to have. So it's kind of a 2-part or 2-answer question. So for a patrol officer coming in, I have no experience, maybe I just graduated college, maybe I'm making a career change or something, you would come in as a police recruit, and it's a paid 6-month academy as well as paid on-the-job training. For that 6 months, you start at a police recruit salary, which I believe is $58,000 roughly a year right now. Once you graduate the academy successfully, you automatically, on your date of graduation, you'll get a pay raise, and we have a police officer class system, so you go from a 4th class, 3rd class, 2nd class, and 1st class, and you rank up each year on the anniversary of your graduation. So as soon as you graduate, you get promoted to police officer 4th class. That is, I believe, a $64,000 a year salary. Past that, your next year you'll get a raise to police officer 3rd class, which is about $70,000 a year. Police officer 2nd class, which is going to be about $78,000 a year, and then police officer 1st class would be where you would top out at the patrol level. Right now, I believe that's about $89,000 a year. If you do come in with prior experience as a lateral police officer from a different agency, you have the potential to start in the academy at the P2 rate, which is going to be that $78,000 a year. Sure. So the environment we work on obviously is out on the streets. We're working, with the community daily, not really in an office. My car is my office. I do my paperwork there. I eat my lunch there. I drive it from place to place. So it's my mobile office. As far as like a typical week for a patrol officer, you're scheduled to work your 40 hours a week. Some people choose to stay at that 40 hours a week. They decide they don't want to come in for any overtime or anything like that, and that's totally acceptable, and it's actually one of the benefits of being on patrol is that you're not on call, you're not required, given any sort of like emergency, but you're typically not required to come in for extra hours beyond your 40. I typically probably work about 50 hours a week. I might pick up a little overtime here or there. Yeah. Yeah, no, not typical is totally accurate. I mean, aside from I wake up at 4 a.m. every day and I start my shift at 5:30, every single day we're putting on our uniform, we're loading up our car, and we sit down and have our lineup. So lineups typically about 20 minutes long. We debrief things that happened the day before, any information that needs to be passed on from the night, the oncoming or offgoing shift, whatever the case may be. And after that, it's pretty much a roll of the dice. You might go, sit at an, in custody party at the hospital for 10 hours for your entire shift. You might go to 12 or 15 calls, which is a lot of calls in a day, and at the end of the day you're just mentally exhausted. You didn't do a single piece of paperwork, but you drove all over the city and talked to 30, 40, 50 different people that day and tried to help them with their problems. You might go straight out to a call that requires some paperwork, and you're on that call for 4, 5, 6 hours doing paperwork. So all that stuff is kind of encompassed, and anything from domestic violence situations, burglar alarms, God forbid, the active assailants and that kind of thing. You really just have no idea what's going to be involved in that. But then we do have other duties, whether it's our days off or days on, court obligations, if we get subpoenas to respond to those things. So there's really no typical day as a police officer. The benefits, I think, with this career, touch on like the COVID thing right now. I appreciate the fact that it's a totally stable job. I know that this is an essential function, so I definitely appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity that we really have to be able to grow in this job. You start as a patrol officer, and everybody starts as a patrol officer. You don't come in and you automatically get hired as a detective, or you automatically get hired as a sergeant. You start at the patrol officer level, but from there it's totally up to you what you choose to make of your career. If you want to go work, for the K-9 unit, if you have a passion for, helping the homeless, you can go work for the homeless outreach team. So there's so many different things that you can do, and I really appreciate the fact that that's, not typical of a lot of other jobs. If you go to work in a dentist office, you're probably doing dentistry. If you go to work, in a lawyer's office, you're doing something, law related. Here we can, you're doing police work, but there's so many different ways that branches out and ways that you can respond and make your career really what you want it to be. Some of the challenges, I would say, honestly, is that I think police officers are expected to wear so many different hats. We are expected, if we go out to a homeless campfire, we play the firefighter and we put the fire out. If we go out to a custody dispute between parents, we play like the lawyer and we explain child custody laws, or we have to explain eviction laws. If we go out to a mental health crisis or something, we're kind of expected to put that hat on and, respond in a social worker type or a therapist type response. And, it's a 6-month academy, and it's phenomenal. And then it's another 4 or 5 months of on-the-job training in our PTO program. But that's where I think a lot of the life experience from a different career or a different education path can really come in handy, because, our job as a patrol officer, while it is law enforcement, and that's typically what people think of, or law enforcement officers, we have so many other things that we kind of have to have a little bit of a hand in, and that we're expected to be able to respond to. So it's a lot of responsibilities, but it's also, again, rewarding because you're not doing the same thing every day. I think that this career is not necessarily special to being compatible or not compatible with family life. I think that's just an overall, human response to how you treat your career. If you are a again, like a banker or a lawyer or dentist or mechanic even, if you spend 18 hours a day at work, your work-life balance is just off. It's your family is going to suffer, your family dynamics are going to suffer. And so in that sense, I think it's something that takes a lot of conscious effort, really put forward by whatever your career is and whoever that career person is, to really make family a priority. So if you want that to be a priority in your life, I absolutely think that that's something that can be achieved. I don't have any question in my mind, and say that speaking from personal experience. There's a time a couple years back where I absolutely placed work as a priority in my life over some of my family obligations, and my family life absolutely suffered. So sometimes it takes somebody to pull you back and say, hey, here's what's important, kind of refocus and recenter yourself. So my favorite aspect of the job is probably all the different people that I get to interact with on a daily basis. I'm from a super small town on the East Coast, and I went to college in an even tinier town, like 2,000 people. So everybody kind of has the same mindset, and everybody kind of, is into the same things or whatever. So when I came out here, I was fascinated by this city. Everybody was different. Everybody was kind of doing their own thing. And at the time, I just thought this was like New York City, like the most gigantic city. But, working in law enforcement, really getting to go out and interact with people, I feel like you get to meet so many different types of people and interact. And we're fortunate enough here in Colorado Springs that it's a destination city. It's a tourist city. We have the training center. We have Pikes Peak. We have so many different interesting things that draw people here. And so we have not just like the natives that come from Colorado Springs and how they've seen the city change and hearing their stories. You have people that have moved here, recently, and learning what they're into and, what they're passionate about, what they do for a living, what their concerns are coming out here. So you kind of get that dynamic, and then you get people that are just passing through, visiting, and have nothing but great things to say about the city. And so it's just fun to really hear and interact with so many different people on a daily basis. So this is a tricky question, I think. I can only hope that, I think we start to see some balance in law enforcement in the future. I think, for example, the military, you look back historically, and, they had challenges too, where, at one point in time it was the shining example of like, hey, I'm in the military, and then kind of the pendulum swings a little bit, and all of a sudden people are not so supportive of it, and then it swings back again. And so I think that law enforcement, just like, that example, is very much in the middle of a pendulum swing. I think we can, in all honesty, probably expect a lot more attrition in the very near future. I think people are, seriously considering what's beyond this career for them, because you do a career, whatever the career might be, for 20, 30, 40 years, but at some point you have life past that career. And so I think people are really stepping back, talking with their family and saying, hey, where do we see our futures beyond any of this? Where do we want to be? So I think that there probably is going to be a little bit of attrition with that, and I don't think that that's probably going to stop anytime in the next couple months or years or anything, but hopefully we can really start to see that pendulum swing back and get some balance. I don't think that there's any room for like the heavy-fisted, knuckle-dragging abuse of authority that a lot of people kind of see portrayed or have associated with law enforcement. But I also very much, having been in this for a couple of years, and knowing a lot of officers, know that there's a time and place for the police to take police action. Unfortunately, that doesn't always look pretty. Violence never looks good, whether it's an action movie on TV in Hollywood or it's in real life in the street for something that needs to be done. It's just not a pretty thing. So hopefully we can see kind of that pendulum swing back, and we can see some balance, and it's a just society and everything, and hopefully law enforcement can kind of recover. I will say, I think in Colorado Springs, we're incredibly lucky to have such a supportive community. Our mayor's office and everything is incredibly supportive of law enforcement and boosting our numbers to alleviate some of our issues that we have. So I very much appreciate that. I think in the last couple months and years, I've not had so many people come up to me and, thank us for our service and stuff. So I know not every community is experiencing that, especially law enforcement officers, where some of the cities are a little more unstable right now. But in Colorado Springs, I think we're pretty lucky. As far as somebody wanting to pursue this career, I would probably tell them to do their research. I would say that no two law enforcement agencies are the same. So really look into yourself, honestly, and figure out what you're trying to get out of a career. If you want like a lot more tight-knit camaraderie, a smaller department is probably something that's better for you. But if you want something where you can grow and, maybe advance or promote or go to, a federal job or something, maybe a bigger department where you have a lot more opportunities to grow is important. So figure out what you're really looking for before you take that step, because it's a huge commitment. Again, it's 6 months in the academy and then at least another 4 months out on our PTO program through training. So kind of taking all that into account and then really doing some ride-alongs and doing your research with that also, because doing a ride-along with like a day shift downtown unit is going to be different than doing a midnight ride-along with somebody, in a different part of town. Doing them with different agencies and seeing, hey, it's not all like driving fast or, the fun going to get coffee or whatever. Like, you might have to sit down and do paperwork for 4 or 5 or 6 hours, and that's not super fun. And sometimes it just happens. So really seeing, hey, this is the stuff, that really can happen. And then, I think it's a good exposure to people to see, mentally or emotionally, am I capable of handling and seeing some of these things. A lot of people have experienced from their past that are traumatic, and sometimes seeing those things can trigger, some pretty emotional responses. And our job as law enforcement officers are kind of to remain emotionally above that and emotionally unaffected until we have a time to step back and deal with that or cope with that in our own ways, whatever that might be. So I think all of that is super important in figuring out, if this is the right job for you. I would add that I think it's important to prepare your family and talk to them about it too. If you have one, if you have kids, if you have a spouse, explain to them that, hey, this can, and maybe it's going to be a 40 hours a week thing. Maybe I become a detective and I'm working 70 hours a week. So if that's what you're interested in, explain to them. And, again, on that same line, reinforce the fact that this is not necessarily a job where I'm going to go home every single day, because there may be jobs where, hey, my kid has a basketball game, I'm going to go to their basketball game after, this evening. For us, we have to anticipate the fact that, hey, I might get dispatched on a really late call and there's nobody else clear to take it, and my plans for the evening just got completely shattered and I can't make it to my niece's birthday party, or I can't make it to the anniversary dinner. So preparing your family for things like that, and then just the downright scary fact that there's a possibility that we couldn't come home at the end of the night. It's something that you again have to look within yourself and then talk with about your family and say, hey, is this something that we as a family can come to some sort of resolution, I guess, or some sort of understanding that, this is where I see my passion, this is where I see my life going, but, this is important to me. I want to make sure that it's okay with us as a family.